I've had the habit for some time of kind of giving you my overview on the latest releases from the theater of the absurd. They're coming with such frequency. They're clearly busier than Hollywood. But I would rather take a little different tack, at least for a few sessions, and remind you of some of the stories, some of the people that are a part of our story, of our history. I find that we really haven't been taught our history, not accurately. One of the tragedies of recent decades, and it hasn't happened in the last few years, it's been going on for quite a while, is we've been incompletely educated. It's really a travesty. It was true in the theological arenas. I mean, it's true in many arenas. But because of that, we simply don't know a lot of the stories, the sacrifices that have been made for our freedoms and liberties, the impact of our faith upon our culture, the significance of our faith in shaping the freedoms and liberties that we have, the contributions of people of faith and people of the church have made, the courage it takes to lead in every generation. Every generation has to make a decision for themselves regarding freedom and liberty. You know, you may inherit some of those things, but if they're to be maintained and extended to the next generation, each generation has to make a sacrifice. And so I shared a few stories with you in recent sessions. I'll share a bit of one in this one. It goes back to the period of the Revolution. As a part of the Declaration of Independence and the struggle for independence from British rule, there was a naval blockade, and there were a lot of things that were in short supply in America, not the least of which was Bibles. Who would have ever thought of that? But the Congress did. I'll read a portion of this, I don't know how much, but by 1777, the result of the British blockades of American ports, America had begun to experience a shortage of several important commodities, including Bibles and Lysol spray and toilet paper. I'm sorry. That was another blockade, wasn't it? They all run together, you know, it's just. But a request was placed before the Continental Congress to print or to import more Bibles. Because unless they could be used, they recognized that the Bibles in our schools, for our families, and for public worship in our churches was essential for the morale of the nation to be sustained. Congress recognized the need, and they had a desire to have a Bible printed. A special congressional committee investigated and found it would be cheaper and quicker to import the Bibles rather than to print them here in America. So it recommended that 20,000 copies of the Bible be imported from Holland and Scotland. For some reason, the shipments were never made, the Bibles were never delivered. And an American printer stepped forward and said, I have the facilities to do that if Congress will order it. And the Continental Congress ordered 30,000 copies of the Bible to be printed in our nation by an order of Congress, and the front page in that Bible acknowledged it as having been ordered by the U.S. Congress. It was the first American Bible. I was planning that story for this weekend, and I went to a meeting in the community this week, and somebody gave me, without knowing any of that, a replica of that first Bible. So it's the truth. I didn't just make it up. Disqualifies me from teaching in many institutions. There's a subtext to that story that's worth noting, because the challenges of today are not unique. The notion of the separation of church and state being used to try to leverage a diminishment of the Christian faith is not unique to the 21st century. 1854, which would be just prior to the Civil War, a group claimed that the government was violating the so-called separation of church and state by allowing government-sponsored religious activities and funding. So the chairman of the U.S. House Judiciary Committee responded by quoting the excerpt from the congressional record from September of 1777, when they commissioned the printing of the Bible. And that was entered into the record then in 1854 to silence those that said our government shouldn't have anything to do with the Christian faith. I assure you, from the founding of our nation until today, the Christian faith has been the most consistent component in maintaining our liberty and freedom. And it has required, it's required men and women of every generation that have the courage first to believe that for themselves, because if you don't believe it for yourself, you'll never believe it would do anything for a community. But if you've chosen to believe that for yourself and you've experienced the freedom that a real faith can bring to the life of an individual, then you understand the value that might bring collectively to a community, a city, a state, or a nation. And we've been fortunate enough in every generation that there has been a group of people with that personal awareness that was real enough and vital enough that they would stand in the public square and watch over that to be extended for the next generation. Again, the question that I have put to you on many occasions is, what will be said of us? Will we point to our retirement funds? Will we point to our social media accounts and our vacation photos? Just exactly what is the legacy we want to leave? If it's one of faith, we'll have to believe it's transformational enough to change our own lives. And if we experience that, then to believe that would be good for the larger public in general. Whether we have just been timid and yielded the field, or we have been bullied into submission, you can choose the reason, but we have been in the shade for too long. And it's time for us to bring our faith back to the public square, to the corporate boardroom and the corridors of the hospitals and the university campuses. We have every right to be there. And we will continue to plummet in the direction we're headed unless the courage of God's people is rekindled. And you should know the freedom and liberty we enjoy is because of some very courageous men and women that have preceded us in many, many generations. And it goes all the way back to those who founded our nation. I want to begin a new study with you under the general theme of spiritual warfare in the end times. Thank you for that enthusiastic response. I'm glad I'm as excited about it as you are. You know, if you listened in to the discussions of Christians for the past few decades, it seems to me that the most consistent message from the Christian community has been to advocate for peace. And I'm not opposed to peace, but being kind has been elevated to the place that it seems that it's more important than being holy. I mean, thou shalt be kind. It's not just the 11th commandment. I think it has trumped the first 10. So I think there's a question or a series of questions that really need to be asked of those of us in the Christian community. How are we to understand what's happening in our world? Because the world is changing rapidly and dramatically. And to what do you imagine is the cause of that? Is it a political shift? Is it ideological change? Is it economic cycles? Is it the ambition of our current crop of world leaders or the lack thereof? What exactly is it? Well, I clearly have a bias, but I would submit to you that underlying all of those things, and I believe all of those things are real and they have an impact, I'm not denying that, but I believe that the cause beneath all of those is spiritual. And I think if we don't understand spiritual things and we don't understand the nature of spiritual conflict, even if we sit in church, even if we imagine we're born again, even if we know the fundamental tenets of the Christian faith, if we're not aware of the nature of the conflict that's engaged around us, that we don't have the impact we're intended to. I don't know that what we're watching is the prelude to the end of the age. I'm not prepared to say that. I think there's some things left to be determined. I think it's a far more plausible explanation that what we're witnessing is the end of an empire. That we're watching the crumbling of something that has been a grand experiment in self-government. And I pray that that can be changed, but that seems to me far more imminent than the end of the age. I'm not saying we're not approaching that, but if we continue on our current trend, it'll feel like the end of the age. I don't think there's any question about that. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. Hit the bell for notifications. If you want to, leave a comment.